I think that it is important for Congress to allow the children who have been victims of this cruel and barbaric practice to sue doctors who have done this kind of thing so that it never happens again. They were lied to, they were manipulated into this mental health frenzy, and I really think that I think that was an abomination what was done to people. Everywhere that there had been in that civil rights law protections for women, those protections now extended to men who say that they are women. And that means that men have access to girls' and women's bathrooms, locker rooms, dressing rooms. They're going to have to do some serious soul searching as a party and figure out which platform they're going to put forward.
Thankfully for America, much of the damage caused by the Biden-Harris administration will be corrected by President Trump. However, their enthusiastic embrace and active promotion of woke culture may have had irreversible effects on countless Americans, as evidenced by the many meltdowns documented across social media following President Trump's historic re-election. Joining me to discuss this unfortunate spectacle is writer and editor-in-chief at the Post-Millennial and Human Events, Libby Emmons. Libby, thanks for joining me today. Welcome.
Sure thing, thanks.
Now, President Trump has already announced that he will ban gender-affirming care for minors nationwide, and this is obviously commendable. But any ordinary person not aligned with the extreme left social agenda understands how common sense this is. So beyond this, what other steps do you think he should immediately take to push back against woke culture, particularly as it pertains to Title IX immediately upon taking office?
Yeah, well, I think that that's a huge thing that you touched on. And of course, Joe Biden, on his first day in office, signed the proclamation on gender and trans into, his executive order right away, where he required all of the federal agencies to come to him with a plan for trans inclusion, which they did. Title IX is one of those, and that was with the Department of Education, which put out an order saying that essentially conflating the concept of gender with biological sex. So everywhere that there had been in that civil rights law protections for women, those protections now extended to men who say that they are women. And that means that men have access to girls' and women's bathrooms, locker rooms, dressing rooms, which of course, if you're in a manufacturing job, locker rooms, that's a thing that happens at work, and also, of course, in sports for universities and lower grades as well. So I think that it is hugely important for Trump to reverse that order on day one. And of course, that includes banning gender-affirming care, which is actually just sex changes for minors. And there's a group out called Do No Harm that went through and found that it's been like millions of dollars spent on, sex changes for minors, and thousands of young people harmed by this.
Yeah, the majority of Americans want to see accountability in so many areas, but specifically this issue. And yesterday, I came across this report from the Times, which revealed that 14,000 children at minimum have had their genitalia removed or been chemically castrated over the past 5 years. So do you think simply reversing these policies that have allowed this to take place is enough? Or do you believe that people that took part in implementing these inhumane practices need to be held personally accountable?
I think that it's a really good start to reverse these orders, but it's going to have a big impact on the agencies that implemented these. And I think it's going to be necessary to extract those policies and reverse them at the agency level. For example, the Department of Agriculture said that schools that do not allow boys to use girls' bathrooms no longer get access to federal free school lunch aid. So they're, punishing poor kids because schools are not going along with woke policy, which is absolutely insane. But I don't think that that's enough. No, I think that it is important for Congress to allow the children who have been victims of this cruel and barbaric practice to sue doctors who have done this kind of thing so that it never happens again. And I don't think that that's legal in a lot of places. Congress was trying to, I think it was Marjorie Taylor Greene was trying to put a law into place providing that kids can sue the doctors that did this to them, and that did not go through, which was really a shame. There are some young women and men who have detransitioned, gone through the process, come out the other side and said, actually, Obviously, I'm not the opposite sex and been able to sue their doctors, and that's been on a case by case basis. But I think we need to see lawsuits brought not against the doctors only, but the insurance companies and the hospitals that have pushed this stuff, and the mental health providers and whoever, backs those mental health providers who have pushed this stuff on kids. I think that's really, really important.
It'll be interesting to see whether there's any accountability in that regard. And for me, President Trump's victory is the ultimate satisfaction by itself, but left-wing meltdowns obviously come with that. And I'll admit, in terms of mainstream media personalities, I do enjoy seeing them have to eat crow and spiral after years of arrogance and posing as the authority. However, in terms of the meltdown that's taking place amongst average Americans, for a lack of a better term, I don't like to say average, but the common people on the left, I actually am sad to see it. I'm sure you've seen the head shaving, the sex strike pledges, the mental breakdown videos on TikTok. And the one thing that comes to mind for me is really mental illness, and specifically how terrible the Democrat Party and media is for causing this reaction. And here's why. And that's the Democrats preyed on this obviously fringe minority of their base and told them that Trump is Hitler, and if he wins, they can kiss their rights goodbye and their livelihoods goodbye, really. So they really primed them for this and hoped it would lead to mobilization and to win. Obviously, that failed, and since it failed, that demoralized them. Can you give me your thoughts on all these meltdowns and the role the mainstream media and the Democrat Party played in them?
Yeah, I think that you're right, and I do agree with you. While it's really fun to see Joy Reid and Rachel Maddow just lose it completely, it's much less satisfying to see that for our neighbors and our friends and our family members and, random people shaving their heads on TikTok. And I think that that's really sad that that's what's going on. And you're right that they were sold a false bill of goods. They were lied to. They were manipulated into this mental health frenzy, and I really think that I think that was an abomination what was done to people, because what the pundits were saying is all of the meaning in your life is localized in federal politics. It's not God. Right? They killed God. It's not family and children. They already told us that that's meaningless, right? So what they've told us is that the most important thing in your life is who the president is what's going on at the federal government. And it's just not, it's just a complete lie. It's the most important thing in our lives, our families, our friends, the people that we care about and love, being kind to each other, going to church and being part of that community, reading good books and experiencing great works of art, sunrises. All of these things are so much more important and essential and wonderful and meaningful than federal politics. Federal politics pales in comparison. It's important who the president is. And I agree that I think we have a great 4 years in store of prosperity for this country under Trump and under a Trump administration. But if Kamala Harris had won, I would be out here saying, I didn't vote for Kamala Harris. I really wish her the best. I love this country, and I support the president, which is exactly what I did in 2016 when I didn't vote for Trump the first time around, because why? Because I'm an American. That's way more important to me than who the president is, right? So I think that's really a shame. And I hope that none of these people who are shaving their heads on TikTok decide not to go home for Thanksgiving just because they're worried about whatever they're told that their fake racist uncle is going to say around the turkey table.
Yeah, you said it perfectly. I mean, in 2020, you look at how the Republicans reacted to President Trump having to leave office. There wasn't crying, head-shaving breakdowns. It was a lot of memes, a lot of mobilization, and it ultimately led to his election this time around. And I think what you mentioned about faith is so on point. Your friends, your family, your faith, really people are the most important thing. And I think, again, just to echo what you said, the left really took that out of the equation for a lot of their people, and that's why when they see that the president is not who they wanted it to be, they have these meltdowns. So it's really sad. I think they're certainly responsible for that. And I do want to stay on the topic of mainstream media, because whether you're a Republican or a Democrat, it's undeniable that all these networks are hemorrhaging viewership. The data shows that. And I saw a tweet from Charlie Kirk that you interacted with regarding the left's search for their own Joe Rogan, which is really funny because Joe Rogan was always more left-leaning before they went so extreme. I believe he voted Bernie Sanders in 2016 or endorsed him. So I do go back and forth on the media motives, however. I believe some networks are just part of the state media that knowingly push lies to hurt Trump or hurt conservatism. And then there are others, particularly in my view on MSNBC, who appear to legitimately believe the insanity they spew. You mentioned the Joy Reids before. and some of them appear genuinely shocked by Trump's win. I want to get your take. What do you, which of the two that I just mentioned do you think is more accurate? Do they knowingly lie, or are some of them really believing a lot of the narratives they speak?
I look for the good in all people, so I would say that they really believe it. And I think they do really believe it. And I think that the people who watch them really believe it. The people who I've known who are liberals, well, I wouldn't necessarily use that term at this point because I think the left is pretty illiberal. But the leftists that I know or have known in my life who do media and do leftist media at this point, they really believe it. 100%. They're sure of it. And I think that that is primarily true when it comes to perhaps the owners of these networks and what they're willing to do and the corners that they're willing to cut on truth and all of that kind of stuff in order to make their money. I think that there probably is some of that, just like there would be in any industry that you would see from the people who are tallying the numbers and trying to make their bottom line, so that's a different kind of thing. But as far as Maddow and Reed, I don't think they think they're lying. I think that they are telling the truth. And I think that's why they are so gobsmacked and confused as to how this could have possibly happened.
Yeah, it's so interesting to see their reaction. Now looking to the future, a lot's going to have to change for, I guess, media, but also the party. And one of the reasons I think the Democrats ushered in this last 4-year reign of chaos is because they felt invincible to a certain extent, particularly due to our flawed election system. They doubled down on their unpopular radical agenda. They weaponized the system against Trump and demonized a now proven majority of the nation by calling them racist, fascist, garbage, because they felt that they could pull enough strings to retain power. Now that they are also well aware that too big to rig, which was a big part of President Trump's campaign, was possible, I want to ask you where you think the party goes from here. Do they double down on woke and try to further muddy our election process to come back into power, or do they move back more towards the middle of the spectrum and try to convince people to actually vote for them?
I think that they are going to have to substantially regroup and figure out which side of the party they are going to let lead. So you have a situation where on one side you have the super woke agenda and they are pro-transing kids. They're pro-abortion up to 9 months. They're pro, the elimination of Israel as a nation. These are things that they seem to really stand for. And then you have the more establishment types, your Nancy Pelosi devotees or your Chuck Schumer style, and they are, pro-Israel and pro-Ukraine, and they seem to be a lot more neocon in their approach. They're very into funding foreign wars, and they won't take a stand, which we saw with Kamala Harris, on where the point for abortion should be, as much as they tout abortion. And they won't necessarily take a stand on transing children. They almost just seem to say that it doesn't exist or it isn't happening. But the places that these parts of the party overlap is they all seem to be super into open borders. So that's definitely a thing. And they seem to be into maintaining power. So they're going to have to do some serious soul searching as a party and figure out which platform they're going to put forward. It's not dissimilar to what we saw with Republicans, where for years we had what we started with Ross Perot. He was like the third party. Then we had, we moved into the Tea Party, and eventually all of that led to the MAGA wing of the GOP, which then became entirely ascendant. But we did see a huge rift in the party, right? We saw the MAGA wing versus the establishment wing. And even now today, in the Senate, they were electing the Senate Majority Leader. There were two guys who were more establishment. There was one guy who was pals with Mitch McConnell for a long time. And then there was Rick Scott, the MAGA favorite. And they went with the John Thune, who was a close aide to McConnell. I believe I have that right, for a good long time. So we're going to see the Democrats go through maybe the same kind of thing that we saw the Republicans go through. And I think it might be a generational type of thing because their leaders right now, Biden is not the leader of the party anymore. They can't lean on Kamala Harris because she delivered a decisive loss. The Obamas backed Kamala, so they're pretty much out. They're going to be having to Pelosi is older than Biden, so they're going to really have to figure out who their leader is, what that leader is going to stand for. And they're going to have to unify that party. Right now, I think their best shot is Brooklyn's Rep. Hakeem Jeffries, who's the minority leader in the House. And I don't think he's really going to do it. You know what I mean? I think you also see maybe someone like Fetterman, who has much more of a common sense opposition view as opposed to these virtue signaling resistors. So I think we're gonna see a bloody fight in the Democratic Party, and I hope that they get it together. I hope they get it together because I think balance is really necessary when it comes to national politics.
I hope so, too. Even conservatives, obviously, when this is what they provided us with, one of the options was Kamala Harris. From a conservative standpoint, it was great because it was a relatively easy victory. However, it would be great if in the event a Republican doesn't win, you actually have a common sense Democrat. And I think it's very interesting that basically at the same time, you saw the Republican Party undergo this massive shift. I guess it started 10 years ago, but now the Democrats are catching up and undergoing their own change. So it's interesting to see them both. They still have the same name, Republican and Democrat, but the parties are drastically changing based on their ideology. Before we let you go, I do want to ask you, what are you most looking forward to or most hoping for in a second Trump term that maybe wasn't there in the first Trump term? Anything you're specifically looking forward to?
Well, I will tell you that there's one thing I'm definitely looking forward to that was there in the Trump term, and that is I think that foreign leaders had a lot more respect for the United States. I think Trump has the appearance of someone who will do anything to protect this country, and that's the kind of for lack of a better word, mama bear attitude I want to see the president have with the United States. And so I'm looking forward to that. I think we've already seen a number of world leaders start to get in line to kiss the ring. And, we're back on that front, and I'm looking forward to that. In terms of what wasn't there under a first Trump term, I'm really hoping that the people who opposed his ascendancy to the White House, I'm hoping that the people who are not happy that he won can stop looking at Trump as something and someone to simply be resisted, and instead look at it policy by policy and say, okay, I'm not crazy about this policy. This one's not so bad. I do think this one is working out. Maybe I like energy independence. And I'm hoping that we can get the country a little more back on track of looking at the presidency as not something that rules our lives, but something that works for us, because we are the people, and the president, the administration, and the government is there to work for us, not the other way around.
I agree 100%. Both great insights, and I want to thank you for your time today. Before we let you go, tell our listeners where they could find you on social media and anything you would like them to know about what's going on over at the Post-Millennial and Human Events.
Well, you can find me on X at Libby Emmons, and you can check out what we're doing at thepostmillennial.com and humanevents.com. And if you want to hear from me every day, you can sign up for my newsletter at thepostmillennial.com/Libby.
We'll be sure to send our members there. So, Libby, thank you for your time today. And for all of our listeners out there, be sure to like and subscribe so that you don't miss out on any of AMAC's great content. I'm Matt Kane. Until next time.
The Association of Mature American Citizens is the conservative voice for Americans 50 and older. AMAC is fighting for the values that you hold dear. Join today. Together, we can write the course of America.